So did you ever have a game where as a kid you've always wanted to try it out after seeing it everywhere you went to, yet you never ended up playing it? One of those games was the Kung Fu Panda video game. You see, back in 2008 when I saw the first movie and absolutely loved it, I've always been very curious about the original Kung Fu Panda game. I saw trailers and commercials for it all the time. It looked really fun and I've always wanted to play it. But I just didn't get it. Even though I had a Wii and a DS, and I really wanted to play a game based on one of my favorite movies, I just never ended up playing it. It wouldn't be until this very video where I can finally see what this game was all about. This game was actually developed by Luxoflux, the same people who made the Shrek 2 game. Though this would be the final DreamWorks game they would do. It was on the Xbox 360, PS3, finally, PC, Wii, and PS2, though the latter two versions were developed by XPEC Entertainment, but they are all the exact same game. Oh, and there was also a DS version like always, but again, we'll talk about it another time. I'm gonna be sticking to the 360 version like usual. This one is even the copy that also has Lego Indiana Jones included. Pretty neat. So, not really much else to say, so let's see what this game is all about. The story is... well, it's the first movie's plot, though, like the other DreamWorks games, it's a more expanded version of it with stuff that's not in the movie. Like Po encounters other villains that weren't in the movie, but interestingly, some of them are actually based on early concepts from the film, like the Wu sisters and the Lang Shadow Army that Tai Lung has. Those were originally early concepts for the movie itself. While they were scrapped, they were still used in the video game, and I find that really cool. I always find it fascinating when licensed games still carry over unused early concepts from their respective source material. Otherwise, it's just the first movie's plot. Not really much else to say on it. In terms of the voice acting, well, aside from James Hong returning as Mr. Ping, none of the actors from the movie reprised their role. The new actors, though, do a solid job for what they got. And I gotta say though, Mick Winger as Poe was spot on. Genuinely really impressive how close he sounds to Jack Black. It's no wonder they brought him back for the Nickelodeon show.
That wasn't so bad. Psh, you know, I've seen worse. Yeah, all the time. I just use my fancy kung fu moves is all.
Gotta say, the presentation is really good. The cutscenes have pretty good animation, the models and environments look really good for the 360. I even like the art that accompanies the text scroll before every level. To be honest, I don't remember much from the OST. It's nice music, but I just don't remember much from the soundtrack, unfortunately. But what about the actual gameplay? Well, it's a hack and slash beat 'em up. If you played stuff like Devil May Cry and God of War, it's pretty much like one of those games. You have regular light and heavy attacks, but also your chi for some special attacks, a multitude of combos you can get throughout the game, as well as the many upgrades to Po you can buy with the coins you collect, increasing your strength, your attacks, health, etc. Like, again, if you've played any hack and slash before, you know what to expect. But I gotta say, this game is really fun. For one, the controls feel great. Po felt really good to handle, and the combat was fast and very fluid. It's just a really fun combat system. I love the amount of things Po can do during these fights. You have so many different combos you could pull off, your different chi attacks, weapons you can find lying around. You're given a lot of options, plus a good amount of enemy types you'll be facing. I just really like this combat system. It's really fun. Of course, there are some other things you're doing in these stages, not just fighting enemies. There's some exploration. You can find some figurines and rare coins to unlock a bunch of bonus features, plus some light platforming. It's pretty basic, but it does break up the action, which is nice, and again, the controls feel really good here. There are also these panda roll segments you'll do, and these are pretty good. Again, they're a nice break between the fights you'll be doing. You also, of course, have some quick time events, and these weren't too bad. I could definitely say they're a lot more exciting to do here than they were in the B-movie game. Like, doing these actually felt satisfying, but again, I'm not super crazy on these to begin with. You'll also sometimes play as a couple other characters during the story. You'll be able to play as Crane, Tigress, Monkey, and Shifu during a few stages. For Crane, you only play for 2 segments in the game, This one where you're navigating through a storm, and this other one where you're carrying Poe and trying to avoid the big crocodile. These were okay. They weren't bad, but definitely pretty forgettable since you're not really doing much during these segments, and I just didn't find the gameplay super interesting here. Tigress and Monkey, you only play as each once in the whole game. Tigress against this one boss, and Monkey during this very short segment towards the very end of the game. I wish you could have played as them more in the story, since I did really like how they both felt, but their segments end before you know it. Shifu you'll at least play as in a couple stages, and he's really fun to play as. I love this dash you could use, and this bounce attack you can use on multiple enemies is really fun. Again, he's only playable in a few stages, but his gameplay was really fun. He's probably my favorite of the side characters you play as. The bosses are pretty decent. Nothing amazing, but these were pretty fun. The final boss with Tai Lung in particular is really good. I love how it captures the final fight in the movie really well with the atmosphere. So, as you can tell, I really enjoyed this game. However, it does have some issues. For one, this game is really easy. Even on normal and above, I never struggled with any stage whatsoever. I think it should have been a little bit more challenging, especially towards the end. While I enjoyed most of the stages, there were a few I wasn't a big fan of. The one in the Jade Palace where you have to protect the artifacts from the thieves was really boring and it lasts way too long. Wasn't really a big fan of this one. The stage where you're playing as Shifu fighting against Tai Lung, I also wasn't big on. I thought it dragged on for way too long, and again, like the other stage I mentioned, it's just pretty boring just protecting stuff from the thieves. Though this stage does have a great atmosphere, I'll give it that. The multiplayer is also really weird. So I couldn't get anyone for this, so I can't really say what it's like. You can't even play with CPUs. But for some reason, you can start a multiplayer match by yourself and it just ends up being you just roaming around the area with nothing to do. I have no idea why you could do this, but I guess it's something. Otherwise, I really enjoyed this game. It's nice to finally be able to play a good DreamWorks game again. The expanded story is pretty neat, the presentation is really good, I love the combat, and everything else for the most part was really fun. I definitely recommend this one, especially if you're a big Kung Fu Panda fan. It's not very long either, it's a good length for what this game is. I had a great time with this one. One of the best DreamWorks games I've played so far. Very happy to finally experience it after hearing so much about it when I was a kid. But we aren't done yet, since I also want to talk about another game for today's video. Now you might have read the title of this video and you may be wondering, wait, forgotten sequel? Oh, you mean the Kung Fu Panda 2 game, right? Yeah, no, that's not the game we're talking about. I was instead referring to this game, Kung Fu Panda Legendary Warriors. You see, while I didn't grow up with the original game, as a kid, I did have this one. But unlike the original game, I didn't hear much about Legendary Warriors. Not many commercials or trailers I saw of it, and even when talking about DreamWorks games nowadays, this game isn't really brought up. It might be due to the fact that this game was only on the Wii, but it was odd. But I also haven't played this game in years, so I want to see what it's all about. This wasn't developed by Luxoflux, but instead it was Artificial Mind and Movement, who I've talked about before with a few games. This came out about a few months after the original game debuted, so I assume it was probably being developed around the same time. But let's check this game out and see if maybe it's a hidden gem. So, like I said, this is a sequel to the movie, and by extension, the original game. And it showcases the return of Tai Lung, wanting revenge for his defeat at the end of the previous game. He plans to use this device to drain the chi energy from the villagers and members of the Furious Five to become the most powerful kung fu master there is. So it's up to Po, Tigress, Shifu, and Monkey to stop him and his army once again. So yeah, you might have thought Tai Lung first came back in the fourth movie, but no, he first came back in this game. Obviously, this story can't fit into the canon with what the rest of the series set up, especially since they never go into how he survived in the first place. But I gotta say, it's pretty interesting seeing this as a what-if scenario. Like, this story basically showcases the consequences of him surviving the events of the movie and previous game. He's far worse than he ever was, showing how much more bitter he is against Po, Shifu, and the Furious Five, with him going as far as to steal the chi energy from the villagers and Furious Five. Like, he's not even after being the Dragon Warrior anymore, he just wants to kill everyone. I mean, at the end of the day, the story is very simple, it doesn't get super deep, but I really dig what they were going for with this what-if scenario. The cutscenes are showcased through these illustrations, and I like them. The art can look pretty nice at times, and the voice acting is still very solid like the first game. As for the rest of the presentation, the game looks alright for a Wii game. The models and environments look decent enough, and I gotta say, I really dig the soundtrack here a lot more. Again, the first game didn't have bad music at all, but Legendary Warriors just has a way more memorable soundtrack. Here's a couple of my favorites. So gameplay wise, it's somewhat similar to the first game, kinda. Well, before I get into that, you can actually pick between 4 characters in the story mode. You got Po, Shifu, Tigress, and Monkey to pick from. I decided to play as Tigress since I wanted to play as someone else other than Po. It's still mostly a hack and slash game. You still got light and heavy attacks, your super chi moves, and even some power-ups you can find. The big difference though between this and the original game is the controls and level design. This is a Wii game, so that means you must use the motion controls for the combat. Now, I never played the Wii version of the first game, so I'm not sure if the control scheme is similar to that, but man, if it is, my gosh. I think the motion controls here are just awful. I don't usually mind motion controls in a lot of Wii games, but here, it just feels really bad. Swinging the Wii Remote and Nunchuck around feels incredibly sluggish just for regular attacks. And when you want to do more involved attacks, you gotta start swinging very specific gestures just to get the attacks to work. And it just doesn't feel good at all. It makes the combat feel so sluggish and underwhelming. Oh, and it doesn't help that the motion controls are also used for these minigames and symbol events, because these suck too. I don't mind the ones where you're shaking the Wii Remote and Nunchuck, those are fine, but the ones where you have to draw a specific symbol or tilting the Wii Remote just feel awful. Especially the symbol minigames, these were so bad. I could barely get through most of these with how picky the gestures have to be. These were so dreadful. And honestly, even if the game used a regular control scheme, the levels are just so boring. All the levels amount to is you in a small arena beating up enemies, doing a quick minigame, and fighting the boss. That's it. No exploration, no platforming, nothing else. It's incredibly repetitive. Like, yes, the first game was also mostly about the combat too, but in that game, not only was the combat really fun and satisfying, but it was broken up with exploration, platforming, and other small but fun gameplay segments. Not so much here. The combat is too sluggish to be fun, the stages are so lame, they feel very similar to each other, and the minigames are just bad. The one saving grace this game does have is I do like the versus mode. You can actually play with CPUs this time, and if you connect the DS version with this game, you can unlock some more characters. That's pretty cool. I don't know many DS games that do that. By the way, yes, there is a DS version, but again, we'll save it for another time. But yeah, I like the versus mode. It's mostly cathartic, and yeah, still, it have to deal with the sluggish controls. But I don't know, this mode was just dumb fun. I can see why as a kid, whenever I played this game, it was usually only the versus mode. I rarely went back to the story mode. But yeah, as someone who grew up with this game, it's not very good. I do like the actual story, the presentation in general is pretty solid, and I do like the versus mode. But everything else is just bad. The combat is awful, the story mode is just terrible, it's repetitive, and I hate how boring the levels are, and the minigames are just awful. I wouldn't say it's the worst DreamWorks game I've played. I still would rather play this over stuff like Shark Tale, Shrek the Third, and the B-Movie game. It also helps that it's a very short game. You can beat it in like an hour and a half, but this game is still bad. I unfortunately can't recommend this one. Even if you're a big Kung Fu Panda fan, I wouldn't recommend it. The story and presentation is the best part of this game, but you could easily just watch the cutscenes on YouTube without even playing this game. I'd stick with the first game if you want a really good Kung Fu Panda game. You can skip Legendary Warriors. Well, in the menu of the Kung Fu Panda game, there is a trailer for the Madagascar 2 game, so I guess that's our next DreamWorks game we'll be looking at. Really excited to play this one, especially since I really enjoyed the first one. If you like this video, give it a like, and if you're new here to the channel, hit that subscribe button. Also, if you played either Kung Fu Panda game, what'd you think of them? Curious if maybe you had a different experience than what I did. Let me know in the comments below. But as always, I hope you all have an amazing day and take care. Bye!